It's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
And the phone number remains the same as always, 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Good morning to you, man. I got to tell you, George Stephanopoulos, I don't know, George, if you're listening out there in New York or Washington, D.C., or wherever you are, man, you've got to step on the clue bus. I've got some audio that absolutely proves that George Stephanopoulos and others within the mainstream media, if that's what you want to call them these days, they are so completely disconnected with where the American people are. So I've got that story for you, a horrific situation going on our southern border. We do have a brand new story for you on that. And Jill Biden has COVID as well. So she's been vaccinated a couple of times. She's been boosted a couple of times. She now has been diagnosed with COVID. They say that the president, just ahead of the G20, he does not have COVID. We'll continue to monitor that situation for you as well. Just a very busy morning here on Red Eye Radio. Gary and Eric return next Sunday night, Monday morning. A little bit about me very quickly. I host a morning show in Nashville, Tennessee on Super Talk 99.7 WTN, a proud Red Eye Radio affiliate. So love this ABC News roundtable with George Stephanopoulos and Donna Brazile, among others. Now, I'm just going to tell you that every time ABC News has one of these roundtables and Donna Brazile is there, this roundtable has absolutely no credibility. Couple of reasons why. Number one, you've got George Stephanopoulos, who, of course, used to work there within the Clinton administration. That's number one. And number two, Donna Brazile, we know that she is, formerly of the DNC, still very much of a Democrat, and she tried to help Hillary Clinton cheat. So for ABC to have these two as part of any supposedly credible roundtable, there is no credibility with that roundtable. All of that to say, George Stephanopoulos, this is the story that's going around this morning. George Stephanopoulos, he is just absolutely stunned, and he doesn't understand how Donald Trump, according to all the latest polling, Donald Trump is now effectively tied with Joe Biden. Despite all of that baggage, despite all of the indictments, this is George Stephanopoulos. Listen.
It is kind of shocking in a way that despite all of the baggage that Donald Trump carries, he's tied with Joe Biden right now.
Shocking, he says. It is shocking. How can I just ask, how is that shocking? Now, first of all, ABC News, again, you don't have a lot of credibility here, but here's the point. How out of touch is George Stephanopoulos? How inside the beltway, swampy, self-important, the media rules, all kind of attitude that he has. So he's just clearly out of touch, George Stephanopoulos. Because there are so many Americans who see, probably a lot of you listening to Red Eye Radio, there's so many Americans this morning that are looking at what's happening not only within the DOJ, within the FBI, within the media itself, and they look at all of this and what's going on in Atlanta with Fani Willis. The more that the American people are looking at what is going on within all of those different entities, the more they realize that even though Donald Trump is constantly and perpetually portrayed as the bad guy, in reality, they are completely ignoring the media, and all those entities, of course, are ignoring the corruption that is Joe Biden. Now, as far as this poll that Stephanopoulos is apparently shocked over, Joe Biden is tied with former President, this is from the Wall Street Journal, Joe Biden is tied with former President Donald Trump in a potential rematch of the 2020 election, with each holding 46% support in a head-to-head test. Now, putting aside all of the other, numbers, this is, an election, it's a general election, but it's, state by state. Everybody knows how we choose presidents, elect presidents here in America. And so just putting all of that aside, just the fact that anybody is shocked by this just isn't really paying attention. They say the negative views of Biden's age and performance in office help explain why only 39% of voters hold a favorable view of Joe Biden. Is that what it is? Is it his age and his performance in office? I think there's a lot more to it than that, and we'll get into that. But they say that only 39% of voters hold a favorable view of Joe Biden. In a separate question, some 42% said they approve of how Joe Biden is handling his job, well below the 57% who disapprove. In other words, Joe Biden, and this is something that has been going on for a long time, Joe Biden is clearly upside down. Every single issue, he is upside down. He's underwater. The economy, 37% of the American people approve of the way that he has handled the economy. 59% disapprove. Inflation and rising costs. Only 34% of the folks out there approve of his ability to handle inflation. Stuff is still going up. No, it's not the 9.1% that it was, but it's still higher than it was back 3 or 4 years ago under Donald Trump. We've got the issue about securing the border. Only 30% of the American people approve. 63% of the American people don't. China, 34% of the American people approve of the way that Joe Biden is dealing with China. 57% do not approve. The war in Ukraine and the billions and billions of dollars going to Ukraine. Only 42% of the American people approve. 52% disapprove. So I want to play this one more time. George Stephanopoulos, and he is hyper-focused on the baggage of Donald Trump.
It is kind of shocking in a way that despite all of the baggage that Donald Trump carries, he's tied with Joe Biden right now.
Again, everything that I just mentioned is why Donald Trump is tied with Joe Biden. Is because people are more concerned, you are more concerned with what's going on with your life and far less concerned with what's going on in the swamp. Because more and more people, as I said at the beginning of this segment, more and more people are looking at what's going on with all of these indictments, all of these investigations, and they're collectively calling BS on it. Because there are people that have been haters and never Trumpers regarding Donald Trump. But they look at what's going on with all of these various indictments, and they realize that for a lot of these cases, they have no foundation. They have no constitutional or legal backing. Now, everybody's got an opinion, and I do understand that. But Stephanopoulos, for him to be so incredibly confused and perplexed, and it's alarming and confused, I don't know why. You see, Stephanopoulos threw out this, and this is indicative of the media. Go watch MSNBC this morning. Go watch some of these other shows from the, if you want to call them the mainstream media. They are hyper-focused on stuff that really, at the end of the day, does it impact your kitchen table? No. Unless you look at it from the perspective, which is what I do, unless you look at it from the perspective that they are trying to take away your ability to choose your presidential candidate, which is where, the 14th Amendment comes in. The Wall Street Journal poll is specifically about policy, not about Trump going to jail or being indicted or his mugshot. The poll is about how people are feeling about the current president and how Joe Biden is doing. And Joe Biden's stinking up the place. I mean, ever since the failed pullout of Afghanistan, his numbers have been underwater, upside down. So for Stephanopoulos to be just so utterly alarmed.
It is kind of shocking in a way.
I don't know what's so shocking about this, George. You know what? I wish I could say that I'm shocked that he's shocked, but I'm not shocked that he's shocked because I've been watching George Stephanopoulos in the mainstream media for years. And they are so incredibly out of touch with the American people. At least I believe so. Yes, people are reacting to Joe Biden's poor job performance. All this other stuff they see as partisan bickering. The people who were polled see Donald Trump as more competent and accomplished. This is from the Wall Street Journal. By an 11-point margin, more voters see Donald Trump rather than Joe Biden as having a record of accomplishments as president. Some 40% said Joe Biden has such a record, while 51% said so of Donald Trump. In other words, by 11%? By an 11% margin, more people see Donald Trump as more competent and having a record of accomplishment. The only thing Joe Biden has accomplished is to wreck our border, wreck the pullout of Afghanistan, wreck the economy. I mean, I could go on. By an 8-point margin, more voters said Donald Trump has a vision for the future. And by 10 points, more described Donald Trump as mentally up to the presidency. Some 46% said that is true of Donald Trump, compared with only 36% of Joe Biden. So, you know what it's like? It's like these talking head shows, on ABC and MSNBC and so forth. They're one-trick ponies. They only see Donald Trump as a convict who needs to be indicted. Forget about the fact that, again, many constitutional scholars and attorneys say that these 4 different cases against Donald Trump are all politically motivated and full of holes. Donna Brazile talks about in this segment on ABC News, she talks about the fact that Black and Latino voters are abandoning Joe Biden. Listen to this.
The problem is, and the biggest challenge we face as Democrats, I say we because I'm a Democrat, is that young voters, young Black and Latino voters, they're not ready to come back to the party. They're not even looking at the so-called messaging that's being sent to them about the economy, about climate change, about student debt relief. They are worried about their future, and right now they're looking for a leader who represents their values and their vision.
And clearly Joe Biden does not. But wait till you hear the rest of this statement from Donna Brazile. Because, again, they're making it all about politics and not about what is going on in the lives of the American people. And for Donna Brazile to talk about, the Black folks out there, the Latino voters out there who are abandoning Joe Biden, I have the exact reason why they are ignoring the messaging from Joe Biden, and they're looking at the actual impact of the man's policies. Details straight ahead on Red Eye Radio, 866-90. Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here. This is Red Eye Radio.
Keep your engine humming in the heat this summer by keeping up with preventive maintenance. Think your PM is complete after your oil is changed? Think again. There's grease, transmission fluids, and gear oil to consider too. Transmission fluid, for example, prevents wear of gears, bearings, and bushings, protects against corrosion, and acts as a heat transfer fluid. You may not think about this every time you get behind the wheel, but as soon as it's not doing its job, you'll notice. Misapplication of transmission fluid can mean reduced fuel economy and abrupt or hard shifts if the static friction is too high. It can also cause sluggish operation at low temperatures if the viscosity is too high and leaking through seals if viscosity is too low. This report is brought to you by Shell Rotella. Shell Rotella, with advanced synthetic technology, is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's 866-90 Red Eye, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis in for Gary and Eric on Red Eye Radio. They returned, by the way, Sunday night, Monday morning. So I don't know why I put myself through this, watching. Maybe it's, so you don't have to, I suppose. But I'm sitting here and I'm watching George Stephanopoulos and Donna Brazile and some of these other folks on ABC. And they're just stunned and shocked that Biden and Donald Trump are tied in national polling, according to this shocking poll from the Wall Street Journal. Now, Donna Brazile is part of this, and you want to talk about tone deaf. I'm going to play you this audio bite again. I'm going to play you the entirety of this audio bite where she can't figure out why the black and Hispanic voters are leaving Joe Biden. Listen.
The problem is, and the biggest challenge we face is Democrats. I say we because I'm a Democrat, is that young voters, young black and Latino voters, they're not ready to come back to the party. They're not even looking at the so-called messaging that's being sent to them about the economy, about climate change, about student debt relief. Right. They are worried about their future. And right now they're looking for a leader who represents their values and their vision. And I think the president's campaign is going to have to really, go deep and go hard to motivate those voters to come back within the Democratic Party coalition.
Look, here's the thing that they're not telling you is that the black and the Hispanic voters out there, the ones that have abandoned Joe Biden, do you know why they've abandoned Joe Biden? Because of policy. So while Joe Biden is out there trying to, and I do understand what he's trying to do with buying the votes, with, trying to pay off, everybody's college loans and so forth, the reality is that, number one, Joe Biden's economy, Bidenomics that he, is so proud of, Bidenomics is killing everybody. Rich, poor, black, white, Hispanic, whatever. So that's number one. But the two specific groups that she is talking about, African Americans, black folks, and Hispanic folks. Well, we have research out there that shows that the influx of all of these illegal aliens does impact the job market, especially and specifically for, they say, the black community and legal Hispanics. This is from the Philly Tribune back about a year ago, and things have just gotten worse. Here's what they say. Many immigrants are indeed hardworking and law-abiding, but the sheer number of newcomers entering the U.S. labor market year after year has created new economic barriers for low-skilled American workers, they say, especially for black Americans. Indeed, as the supply of less educated labor increases due to, I will say, illegal immigration and Joe Biden, competition for jobs requiring a high school degree or less become much greater. And black Americans suffered disproportionately. So you can throw legal Hispanic Americans in there as well. All of these illegal aliens, basically what they're doing is they're diluting the workforce and they're suppressing wages. I mean, why hire an American for $15 an hour when you can hire somebody under the table from, I don't know, El Salvador or Guatemala or Honduras or Mexico for $8 an hour? And again, under the table. There's this headline from the Daily Mail. This came out just a little bit ago. Staggering figures reveal 1.2 million. Listen to these numbers. 1.2 million U.S.-born workers lost their jobs last month, replaced by 688,000 foreign-born staff, as Joe Biden allows migrants to flood across the border. Donna Brazile, George Stephanopoulos, you might want to read this and educate yourselves.
Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios. Now, for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, here is Dan Mandis.
Appreciate you being here. The phone number is 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Some notable, just very quickly, some notable deaths from the music world. Of course, you probably have already heard that Jimmy Buffett passed away. Also, Smash Mouth singer Steve Harwell also passed away. And Gary Wright, you know, the Dreamweaver guy, he has also passed away. That news coming out here in the last 5 or 6 hours, I believe. And, so for people who like to talk about how they die in threes, well, there's three right there. Gary Wright, Jimmy Buffett, and Steve Harwell. And I got to tell you, I was a big Smash Mouth fan, also a big Jimmy Buffett fan. Gary Wright, 1-2 songs that I liked of his as well. So just a very, especially for the Parrot Heads, man, that was a big loss. Interesting about Jimmy Buffett, by the way, because he had, you know what he died of? I don't know if you saw this. He died of skin cancer. He was diagnosed with skin cancer years ago, and he basically kept it quiet for, years and years. He kept it quiet, and then finally, upon his death, they call it he died after a secret battle with cancer. So he never really talked much about the fact that he had cancer. You know what happened there in the last week of his life? Paul McCartney. Did you read about this? Paul McCartney flies all the way to wherever Jimmy Buffett lives and sang to him basically on his deathbed. That's part of the story out there this morning. So Jimmy Buffett, Gary Wright, and also Smash Mouth singer Steve Harwell all passing away here in the last couple of days. Now, talk about this headline, because I do find it, and I don't know, maybe it's just me. You folks like to, some people get angry when they watch the likes of, Donna Brazile and George Stephanopoulos and, Chuck Todd and, all of these people within the mainstream media. And they're hand-wringing and they're nail-biting, and they're really worried about the fact that Joe Biden and Donald Trump, they're tied in this Wall Street Journal poll. It was one of the biggest news stories out there on Sunday, because everybody's talking about this. And I'm telling you that as you watch all of these different segments, what's fascinating is they keep talking about, and I played you the audio of Stephanopoulos, where he is like, it's alarming, it's shocking, it's surprising, it's stunning that with all of the legal problems of Donald Trump, that he and Joe Biden are tied. You know what I would look at that? Do you know what I would say? What the heck does that say about Joe Biden? I mean, you can sit here all day and you can blast Donald Trump, which they do every single day. But what about Joe Biden? You see, I believe that it says more about Joe Biden that you have an American president who has been in office for 2.5 years, and dude has literally shanked everything he has touched. And that's why he is having such huge problems that he can't even beat in national polling a guy that has been indicted, 91 times in 4 different cases. I think this says more about Joe Biden than it does Donald Trump. And remember what Donna Brazile was saying. I was playing you this audio right before the break, because you've got now all of these people that are trying to figure out what in the world is going on with Joe Biden. Well, I mean, all you can say is look at the policies, man. Joe Biden has an open door policy when it comes to the southern border. It's an open border policy. And so when Donna Brazile says, I don't know why the messaging from the Biden administration isn't taking hold with young black Americans, with young Hispanic Americans. Well, the reason why is because inflation, although it's not at 9.1 where it was a year ago, it's still higher than it was during the Trump administration. That's number one. And number two, real wages are nothing to sneeze at these days. They're not doing well at all, in the sense that real wages is not necessary. They're not keeping up with inflation. Now, depending on what you look at, things are getting better. But as I always say, and I host a morning show in Nashville, Tennessee on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Feel free to check me out there at 997WTN.com. But when you look at the real wages, which is how wages are keeping up with inflation, again, they're better than they were a year ago, but still struggling. And now you have thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people that are losing jobs because of foreign-born workers coming into our country illegally or otherwise, just depends on how you look at it. And a lot of those people that are losing their jobs are young Black and Hispanic folks. So while you've got all these, people on the left saying, well, we don't know why the Black community and the Hispanic community is fleeing the Democrat Party. Well, look at the policies. And the other thing that I would point out before I get into some of these numbers here, but the other thing that I would point out is, anybody want to talk about the soft on crime policies that are indicative of Democrat rule in all of these cities across America? You people listening in Chicago, you people listening in Washington, D.C., and some of these other cities, folks listening in Los Angeles. I mean, basically, is there any city in California that is doing well under these Democrat Soros-funded district attorneys? No. Look at Oakland. Look at San Francisco. Look at Los Angeles. Overrun with crime. And a lot of the victims of that crime, Black folks. That's why Black people are angry with the Democrat Party. All of this insanity about Black Lives Matter and all this stuff going on. You know what? The reality is that while the sentiment certainly is true, of course, of Black Lives Mattering, the political organization and the defunding of the police movement, that has decimated the Black communities. Joe Biden's a Democrat. Kamala Harris, of course, obviously Democrat, and somebody who has been out there advocating for some of these organizations that go in and bail out these folks that are in jail for abhorrent crimes. And then they get out of jail, and what do? They go out and they commit more crime. And people in Hollywood and Kamala Harris, and a lot of these activist organizations, they go out and after George Floyd was killed. And so they had this whole movement of defunding the police. And you have all of these, nice, innocent people that are just sitting in there in jail. And we've got to go out and we've got to bail all these people out. So then they bailed all these people out. They bailed all these folks out. And what happened? More crime. And that is happening in all of the cities that I just mentioned. So people cannot escape the tyranny of Democrat rule, whether it's the crime in these cities, in these Democrat-infested cities, and, of course, all of these folks that are losing jobs. This is from the Daily Mail. You ready? Staggering figures have revealed that over 1.2 million U.S.-born workers lost their jobs last month, while the foreign-born workforce increased by nearly 700,000 as migrants continued to flood across the border under the Biden administration. Data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics show that between July and August, there was a staggering decrease of 1.22 million native-born people in the workplace, which is a low not beaten since the jobs crash when COVID hit in April of 2020. In a stark contrast, almost 688,000 jobs were secured by foreign-born workers, underlining the difference in Joe Biden's pro-migration policies versus Donald Trump's tough border stance. I will remind you, I spoke about this in the opening segment. Securing the border, only 30% of the American people approve of Joe Biden's train wreck of a southern border. 63% of us don't. So the more that you hear about, George Stephanopoulos and the rest of these people from the swamp trying to figure out.
It is kind of shocking in a way that despite all of the baggage that Donald Trump carries, he's tied with Joe Biden right now.
You know what, George? It's not shocking. It is not shocking in the least. As I said before, the only thing that I'm shocked over is the fact that you're shocked. And if you're shocked, then you're not paying attention. You see, I think part of what happens, and I don't even know, I had a conversation, I forget who it was with. There was somebody I was interviewing, a pundit somewhere. And they were talking about the media and how the media is really shouldn't be called mainstream media anymore, because the media these days is so far from the mainstream because they are not in touch with the mainstream of Americans. Because the mainstream of Americans, they know what's going on. And they don't like what they're seeing. So nobody at this brain trust of political insight on ABC has anything to say about Biden's border issues related to jobs. How about, by the way, how about the fentanyl crisis and all the drugs coming across our southern border? Do you think that black or Hispanic Americans might be a little sick and tired of the drug wars impacting their neighborhoods? And you know what? I should actually restate what I just said, because I said the drug wars impacting their neighborhoods. There is no drug war that's going on right now. We are simply allowing the drugs to come across our southern border. And when I say we, I mean Joe flippin' Biden. So, yeah. Yes, Donna Brazil. Yes, George Stephanopoulos. Yes, people at ABC. People are angry, and people are frustrated with what's going on. And by the way, anytime somebody wants some help, and anytime somebody wants to look at the policies of Joe Biden and then compare and contrast that with the policies of Donald Trump, and they may say, you know what? The policies of Donald Trump, we weren't going through all of this when Trump was president. Susan Page is with USA Today.
And Susan Page, with every passing month, with every new indictment, Donald Trump seems to be consolidating his control over the Republican Party.
This Wall Street Journal poll, after 91 criminal counts against the president, which only strengthened his position. So I don't know why we think that a conviction on one of these counts or more would fundamentally change the fact that Trump supporters have baked into the cake the fact that he has these legal troubles. You know, in the Wall Street Journal poll, if you added the third-party candidates, Trump leads narrowly over Biden. That is the situation we find at this point.
Listen, the situation that we find as Americans is that stuff is a lot more expensive. And again, it's about what the American people are experiencing. You know, you just heard George Stephanopoulos, and he keeps going back to the indictments. He keeps going down to what I would say, by the way, I would call this focus on the indictments. You know what I call this? I call this low-hanging fruit. Because it's easy to breathlessly talk about the indictments. It's easy to breathlessly talk about how Donald Trump tried to steal the election, overturn the election, blah, 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 blah. By the way, I don't know, I didn't see anywhere within this, this whole conversation with George Stephanopoulos and some of these Washington, D.C. insiders, didn't hear them talk about Joe Biden and all his problems with his, fake emails and all that kind of stuff going on. No, nobody wants to talk about Hunter Biden and his corruption. They just want to talk about Donald Trump. Okay, that's all fine, well, and good. Oh, there's more. There's a lot more, and it's all straight ahead. 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here. This is Red Eye Radio.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here in for Gary and Eric. They do a return next Sunday night, Monday morning. So talking about, just very quickly as we wrap up the hour, about the cluelessness of the media. And let me ask you folks a question. What is a better name for the mainstream media? Because I simply don't believe that the mainstream media these days, I don't think that they're mainstream anymore. I mean, based on this whole, this discussion with George Stephanopoulos and Donna Brazile and some of these other folks, it is so clear that they are so far not even remotely close to the mainstream of America. So what is a good name for the media? And do you even pay attention to the quote-unquote mainstream media anymore? 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339.
Top of the Hour News is brought to you by House Products. Visit houseproducts.com.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
Phone number remains the same, 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Man, there's a lot going on this morning. Appreciate you listening. And the gentlemen, Gary and Eric, they return next Sunday night, Monday morning. You can find out more about me on the Dan Mandis Show Facebook page. I'm also on Twitter as well, both at Dan Mandis Show. And got to tell you, I thought this was interesting because they're talking about in this new poll that people are apparently, they say, dreading. That's the term that they use, dreading the next presidential election. Here's what they say. Chris Borick, political science professor at a place called Muhlenberg College, said he is not surprised that people are saying that they are not looking forward to the next presidential election. They say that there is an absolute fatigue amongst the American people regarding politics right now. It's been, in many ways, a brutal stretch for the country in terms of politics. He says, Chris Borick of Muhlenberg College, for many Americans, he says, there's not excitement or energy approaching 2024. It is more dread, he says, and I've heard this before about people dreading the 2024 presidential campaign, especially if it comes up to be Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. They say part of that dread, he says, is the constant news about a probable presidential rematch between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, not just a replay of one of the most vitriolic presidential races in modern history. They say, in which the loser has still refused to admit that he lost, but also a reminder of a year that was pretty awful for most Americans. Do you know what I would say? And I've been saying this for a long time now. Donald Trump could go on the most epic of I Told You So tours ever. Because he did tell us, didn't he? I mean, when the former president during that debate talked about the laptop from hell, and Joe Biden talked about how and rambled on and on about, there's 51 national intelligence officials from both sides saying that the laptop from hell was Russian disinformation when it turned out that it wasn't. And Biden knew that that thing was real and credible and that his son was actually making money from China, making money from Russia, making money from Ukraine and Burisma and so forth. Oh, yeah, Donald Trump could absolutely go on an I Told You So tour. And quite frankly, he probably should. I mean, obviously he's running, but to me, clearly this is something that for Republicans, we need to keep hitting that aspect of the 2020 election, because that really is indicative of the media and the Democrats and Joe Biden and the lies that they have been telling. And so I do wonder, if you want to chime in on this, it's 866-90-RED-I, 866-907-3339. Are you looking at the next political election heading into 2024? Are you looking at this with dread? See, I'm not looking at this with dread at all. I'm looking forward to this because I believe that Joe Biden, he has got to be held accountable for the lies that he told during 2020. I mean, even the media, believe it or not, some in the media are slowly but surely admitting that Joe Biden has problems, because it is clear that he does. A new book is out there detailing Joe Biden's White House, as the president clearly is having a lot of problems. In the first hour, I was telling you about a lot of the hyperventilating that's going on within the media and the left, because New Wall Street Journal poll came out over the weekend saying that Donald Trump and Joe Biden are tied. And that Biden, every single important issue, he is underwater. And more Americans see Donald Trump as more competent and more accomplished. And so a lot of folks are now talking about not only that poll, but also a new book that is indeed detailing Joe Biden's White House. And it's by a guy named Franklin Foer, and it's called The Last Politician. And it's all about the inner workings of the Biden administration and how the president is having a hard time because of his age. And you see, I don't think it's because of his age. I think it's because of the fact that he is simply not all there cognitively. It has nothing to do with age. It has everything to do with the president's ability to think and to relate ideas and to understand what is happening around him. And that's part of the book. And Biden responded to that premise that age is an issue. This is part of what he said on the campaign trail over the weekend.
I tell you what. Someone said, that Biden, he's getting old, man. I tell you what. Well, guess what? The only thing that comes with age is a little bit of wisdom. I've been doing this longer than anybody, and guess what? I'm going to continue to do it with your help.
Yeah, okay, guess what? The American people find you incompetent, Joe Biden. So if you would like to keep going down that road, that's all fine. But here's the deal. 77% of Americans and 69% of Democrats believe that Joe Biden is too old. So he can sit here and guess what all over the place. But again, the American people, there's no guessing when it comes to this AP poll. I mean, everywhere you turn, if you're a Biden supporter, there's nowhere to rest your eyes. Whether it is the president and his age, his cognitive abilities, his administration, his policy ideas, everywhere you turn, it's a complete and utter disaster for the president. But according to this book, people who work closely with Biden realize that he does have an issue with, and again, they're trying to say this is about age. I'm trying to tell you folks, it's not about age. It's about his cognitive issues. And they worry about what he is going to say or what he's going to do, which is why part of the narrative out there, part of the story is that they can't schedule anything before 10 a.m. because they know that Biden's going to train wreck it. I mean, what do we know about Biden? And whenever he goes out and he gives a speech, what does he do? He mumbles. He doesn't make a lot of sense. He gets a little testy. He walks around the stage trying to figure out where the heck he's supposed to go after he finishes his speech. Then he does the little Biden jog heading off the stage. He may or may not fall, and he tries to run around shaking hands with nobody. I mean, those are all hallmarks. Those are all tenets of Joe Biden and his appearances these days. And so, yes, there's a lot of face palming within the Biden administration whenever they send him out. And so the guy who wrote the book, again, his name is Franklin Foer, and he was on Meet the Press, and he told Chuck Todd that Biden may have a public perception about what is going on with his administration. Behind the scenes, he says that Joe Biden is actually alert and really good at stuff. That's what they're trying to sell the American people, that the American people perceive the president as one thing, but in reality, he's really on top of things. Listen to this from this interview with Chuck Todd.
I'm not a gerontologist, and I can't predict how the next couple of years will age Joe Biden. I think what my book does is shows that he is somebody who, for whom he's buried in details. He's somebody who is very technocratically obsessed with the intricacies of policy. He's a very activist president in that he micromanages a lot of the dealings in the White House.
BS.
When it comes to something like talking,
but you don't see that.
You don't see
what
that.
you're describing is much different than his public persona.
Yeah.
Yes. The reason why what he is saying is far different from his public persona is because every time he goes out there onto the campaign stage,
The best way to get something done, if you hold near and dear to you that you like to be able to, anyway.
I mean, every time he goes out, he has an issue. So while the guy who wrote this book, and I'm here to tell you, I don't believe that Joe Biden is buried in details. I don't believe that Joe Biden is on top of everything that's going on within his administration. I don't believe that he is mired in policy. I don't. So it's almost like this guy, again, Franklin Foer, F-O-E-R, whatever his name is. He is trying to sell to you that he is really doing well cognitively behind the scenes, but you know what? When he's just, in front of the cameras and in front of crowds of people.
The best way to get something done, if you hold near and dear to you that you like to be able to, anyway.
Yeah. So the issues are that Joe Biden gaffes all the time. He tells the same stories over and over. And by the way, ones that have been disproven at that. I heard Gary and Erica speaking last week about this same story that he tells over and over again about his kitchen fire in Delaware years ago. He has gone from, this thing was a small kitchen fire, which is what the fire department says. He has gone from that to the entire house was burned down, and we almost lost a couple of firefighters that day, and they rescued his wife, Jill. I mean, the way that he paints the story of this house fire in Delaware is full of BS. And everybody knows it, including the Washington Post. So he is constantly gaffing. He is constantly lying. I mean, there's the one about how he almost got arrested as a civil rights protester going to see Nelson Mandela. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I've lost track of all of Joe Biden's lies. But it's like a daily lie about his personal life or his past or his legislation. Everybody knows how his first run at the presidency ended with plagiarism. So there's a myriad of issues where he just sort of rambles on like an old person. He falls asleep everywhere he seems to go as well. He keeps falling down. There's that. So this interview with this guy, Franklin Foer, continues with Chuck Todd, and they talk about, one of Biden's biggest fears. What is Joe Biden's biggest fear? Well, his biggest fear apparently is being seen as stupid.
The best way to get something done, if you hold near and dear to you that you like to be able to, anyway.
And I don't know why Joe Biden would have that fear. Maybe it's because of comments like that. And so when Biden is apparently, according to this guy, he says that Joe Biden does nothing but study. He does nothing but, again, remain mired in policy. when in reality, the American people see Joe Biden as just a befuddling old man who can barely string two words together. And so finally, the quote that everyone is writing about this morning, he talks about how would he be surprised, this Joe Biden biographer, would he be surprised if the president dropped out of the race? Listen.
I would say it would be a surprise to me, but it wouldn't be a total surprise.
Wouldn't be a total shock.
It wouldn't be a total shock.
Why is that?
When he talks about his life, he uses this word fate constantly. Joe Biden is a very religious guy, and fate is a word loaded with religious meaning, and he always talks about he can't say where fate goes.
Well, in other words, we really don't know what's going to happen with Joe Biden. A lot of people out there that are a lot smarter than me saying that what the Republicans and the Democrats, I think a lot of them agree, is that Biden is simply not cognitively able to go another 4 years. I mean, the question is, will he even be able to go another 2 years? So there's a lot there, and a lot of the Democrats are saying, well, you know, the whispering he's too old. But the reality is that there is a lot of corruption within the Biden administration. So, you know, the Democrats saying, well, he's too old, could actually be put too old in like air quotes and replace too old with too corrupt. And so they may use this, he's too old, as an excuse to get rid of a guy who is absolutely mired in corruption. I've got the latest on that corruption coming up, by the way. More of your phone calls also straight ahead at 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here on Red Eye Radio.
Independents with carrier authority should be mindful that negotiation strength varies as the week progresses. Typically, the highest rates across major segments are paid for loads negotiated on Sundays, and the highest volume of loads for all segments is seen on Mondays. Also, the weekday that tends to be the best for flatbed negotiations, yielding the best rates. Owner-operators tend to have less negotiation strength on Tuesday, which shows the lowest weekday spread between brokers' offered rates and actual paid rates. Broker offers tend to rise by Wednesday as the end of the week is in sight. This day also seems optimal for the 3 o'clock hustle, so-called for its reliance on that afternoon time of day, when brokers are getting nervous, to improve negotiation strength. Stay mindful of this system to maximize your revenue. Owner-Operator Business 101 is provided by Shell Rotella with advanced synthetic technology. For more information, go to overdriveonline.com to the Overdrive's Partners in Business section of the website for more detail on Business 101 and many other topics.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
Eight 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis in for Gary and Eric. And Dan is in Lubbock, Texas on Red Eye Radio. Hey, Dan, how are you?
Hey, doing pretty good.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but Michael Brown's the one who's going to take credit for that. Listen to him in the mornings.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Homeland Security guy?
Yes,
he's always calling him the dominant media. Yeah, and then you got talking about Biden, and I'll give you some original. You know, the guy passed away a couple of years ago, but I really think if Lloyd Bridges were still around, he could do like a Biden biopic, a Biden parody, turn-by-turn navigation on your GPS. Yep. I mean, he'd be perfect for Joe Biden.
You know, hey, Dan, I want to go back to what you said about calling the media the dominant media. Do you think that's true anymore? And just hear me out. So, you know, Chuck Todd and George Stephanopoulos and all these guys, who do you think is more influential? Somebody like a Chuck Todd or a George Stephanopoulos, or someone like maybe, for example, a Joe Rogan and some of these podcasters who have millions and millions and millions of people that watch their podcasts, you know, or Robert F. Kennedy Jr., some of these other folks who have a massive audience.
Yeah, I think it's really a generational thing. I mean, I grew up in Chicago, all the older family, they're still that old school Democrat that are completely blind that their party is long gone. They'll never change. But there is some of the older generation that's waking up and turning the different channels and getting on the internet and doing things. It's been a rough change in my parents' opinions that I got to tell them sometimes, like, hey, how come there's two different things on two different channels? Mom, like, one of them's got to be right, one's got to be wrong, and you're hearing two different stories.
Yep, no, and you're right, Dan. I appreciate the call very much. The dominant media, I don't know. I think the media still believes that it's dominant. Your Chuck Todds and your George Stephanopoulos of the world. I believe that they believe that they're dominant, but they're not.
Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios. Now, for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, here is Dan Mandis.
866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. You can find out more about me on the socials at Dan Mandis Show, primarily on Twitter and Facebook. I'm also on Instagram as well. And asking a couple of vague questions tonight. Number one is I do find it fascinating that there are some folks that are out there and some polling that does show that the American people are, quote, dreading the 2024 campaign. And so I'm asking you, are you dreading the campaign? You see, I'm not, because I'm looking forward to hearing Joe Biden be held accountable for the lies that he told during the previous campaign. I would also like to see Joe Biden held accountable for things like the pullout of Afghanistan. That was a complete and utter tragic train wreck. What is going on the southern border? How he really is able to spin Bidenomics into something that is a positive when in reality the vast majority of the American people find Bidenomics as a negative. So I'm not, for me, I'm not dreading this at all. I'm actually looking forward to that. And number two, and I was talking about this in one of the previous hours about the media. Should the media be known as the quote unquote mainstream media? Because it really does seem to me like those media outlets that we speak about often, they are so incredibly out of touch with where the American people are, specifically when it comes to Joe Biden and the Democrats. Because their sole focus seems to be on everything Donald Trump and his indictments. When in reality, the American people are more concerned with what's going on with their pocketbook and their family and their country. And by the way, Joe Biden has had an adverse effect on all of those. And so we'll continue to talk about that. 866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Want to say hello to Phil in Fredericksburg, Virginia on Red Eye Radio. Hey, Phil, how are you?
Pretty good, Dan. Look, I get my my news. I get my news from YouTube. I don't have TV anymore because I got so sick of it. I actually turned it off and saved myself $100 a month on my cable bill. And but the thing that gets me is your last caller really hit it right on the button. These Democrat voters, we got to find a way to reach them and to open their eyes to what's going on, because they walk around with blinders on and they vote against people. They don't vote for people. That's why Fetterman got into office, because they voted against Oz. They didn't like Oz. They didn't even care that Fetterman is a vegetable practically. And so now we got Biden, who we need to get out of the White House. We need to get this whole administration out of the White House. We need to find a way to mobilize the Democrat American voter to vote Republican. I don't know how we're going to do it, because
Phil,
they're really
it's like
blinded.
Phil, as Gary and Eric always say, and it's true, which is the American people, voted for this. I mean, we have seen this time and time again in major cities across the country, where these cities are not doing well I mean, you're calling from Fredericksburg, Virginia, so nearby Washington, D.C. You and I both know that Washington, D.C. is I mean, there's a lot of crime in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of problems. Yeah, there's a lot of problems in D.C. You can talk about Seattle. You can talk about Portland, Oregon. You talk about any of these cities. And they continue to vote in the same party that has led to these cities' demise. So, Phil, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, you're right. We need to reach these Democrats. But you know what? If they haven't figured it out by now, I don't know if they ever will. Let's see here. Mary is in Detroit, another Democrat-run city that's having a lot of problems. Mary, how are you? Thanks for calling Red Eye Radio.
Thank you for taking my call. I just want to put my 3 cents in. First of all, I go around everywhere I go. I ask people who they're going to vote for here in Michigan. I've been to dealerships. I've been to gas stations. I've been to grocery stores. I've been festivals. I've been to craft shows. I ask the crafters, and they're for Trump. I ask the people at the festivals. I'm not afraid to ask people who they're going to vote for. You know, at first they're a little hesitant, and then they go, well, Trump. And I go, well, okay, and I high-five them. You know, and then I go to the gas station. I asked I have to tell you, they were Arab. They were in the gas station, running the gas station. I asked the 3 Arab guys behind. I'm not afraid to ask. I said, who you guys voting for? And they all 3 of them said Trump. All 3 of them. And then I go to the car dealership because I had to do something on my car. And I was asking the guy in the paint department, you know, oh, yeah, he's a Trump voter. And he said, he's not. I said, I'm not thrilled about these electric vehicles. He goes, yeah, you're not alone. A lot of people come in here and don't want to have nothing to do with it.
Oh, no, yeah. No, Mary, there's so many.
Yeah, and the lady at the grocery store, she says, costs too much for groceries. I can't wait for Trump to come back. They're all excited because they want to go back under Trump's economy. And one other thing they liked about Trump, he said, hey, you're going to have your fans, you're going to have your gas stoves. I'm not taking none of that away from you like the Democrats are. He said, you have your choices because you live in America. You know, you can have your gas car, you can have your EV. Take your choice.
It's crazy, Mary, because you've got the Democrats and Joe Biden, and they're going after your ovens, your ceiling fans.
Right.
Now
and
they're
Trump
telling us how much to drink.
He wouldn't let them do that. That's why a lot of people say, hey, I'm voting for him. They're excited about it. So Mr. Negativity out there, who's ever saying people aren't excited, not the people I run into, because I go everywhere I go, and I go all over the Tri-County area, you know. And then I see the Democratic.
Hey, Mary, let me ask you, have you heard about what's going on in Muskegon with the voter fraud?
And I wish more people would talk about that. It's horrible what they did there. Horrible.
Well, I'll tell you, thank you, Mary, for the Mary's very excited. Thank you, Mary, for calling. I appreciate it. Here is what's going on in Muskegon. Now, Muskegon is in Michigan. I happen to know where Muskegon is. I've spent some time there when I lived in kind of close to Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is one of the places where I worked. And for 3 years, we visited Muskegon often. So here's the headline in Muskegon. Now realize that in America today, if you even go down the road of asking about election fraud, pointing out irregularities and things that just look a little bizarre, look a little strange, you are called an insurrectionist, right? An insurrectionist, right? If you just say, hey, can we ask about, what happened in Muskegon and some of these other places, you're called an insurrectionist, and people come down on you. And people say that you're, quote unquote, pro January 6th violence and all this other insanity. Well, here's what's going on in Muskegon. This is a headline from Fox 17 Online out there in Muskegon. Documents detail an investigation into alleged Muskegon area voter fraud. Republicans said that they have uncovered voter fraud that could have impacted the entire state of Michigan. Now, you folks know that Michigan is an incredibly important state as far as elections go. Donald Trump won it in 2016, big upset, and Joe Biden won it in 2020. But now there are some questions regarding what happened in 2020 in Michigan. Republicans say that they have uncovered voter fraud, again, that could have impacted the entire state in Muskegon. They say that this organization called GBI Strategies a voter registration organization allegedly submitted fake voter registration applications to Muskegon County. And the Gateway Pundit and some other folks on Twitter say that clerks across the state also received boxes of blank registrations for basically anyone to fill out. And so there's some voter irregularities. Some say, some possibilities of cheating going on in Muskegon and in Michigan. Now, I don't know what happened in Michigan, but I know that the Republicans, they've been on this for quite some time. Biden won Michigan by around 150,000 votes in the previous election in 2020. Trump and the Republicans felt so strongly about Michigan that Donald Trump's final rally in 2020 was in nearby Grand Rapids. That's how important Michigan was. And so now here we are in September of 2023, years after the fact. And they're still looking at what may have happened in Michigan. By the way, this SBI, what's this place called? GBI Strategies. This organization that supposedly sent all of these various voter registration cards and so on to these various counties across Michigan. They get big time donations from Democrats and even from Joe Biden. To show you how crazy this all is, the Democrats in the state are going after Republicans for investigating the voting machines after the 2020 election. So you have the Republicans accusing the Democrats, and you have the Democrats going after the Republicans looking at voting machines. By the way, this GBI Strategies, they also have offices in Georgia, and Tennessee, where I'm at. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, and other states as well. And by the way, everybody, of course, knows that voter fraud does go on. Now, the question is, okay, so let's take it just to let you know that I have an open mind on this stuff. So let's say that you look at all of the possible voter fraud that may have happened in Michigan. You look at all of the various voter registration cards that came in, they were blank, whatever. Would it have been enough to help Donald Trump defeat Joe Biden in Michigan? Now, the people on over there on the left side, they'll say, well, yeah, but we caught all of this. The Republicans and, the clerks in these various counties, including Muskegon, they caught the possible fraud. They received the cards and they reported the cards. And so, look, the system worked. That's what they'll tell you. Okay. I don't know. That's what the Republicans need to figure out. And again, the Democrats are going after the Republicans for apparently after 2020 getting a hold of some of these voting machines and looking for fraud. So there's a lot going on in Michigan. There's a lot going on in a lot of these different states across the country. Michigan clearly, of course, is a very big deal. This GBI Strategies, by the way, guess what? The Biden campaign and the Democrats gave millions and millions and millions of dollars to this very suspect organization, GBI Strategies, which people are now looking at as a possible connection to fraud. Michelle is calling from Chapel Hill, North Carolina on Red Eye Radio. Hey, Michelle.
How are you?
I'm good. Go ahead, please.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to speak. I wanted to speak about you were talking about Joe Biden and the issue of the word old being used, that he's too old to run or he's not too old to run. The word old is not the word. He has dementia, and nobody seems to want to say the word. I don't know why. My husband and I are both physicians, and whether I'm a neurologist or I'm not, I have enough knowledge to, and many other people have the same knowledge because they've had family members with it. One of the big words I want to discuss is the word confabulation. And I think we need to understand what confabulation is, and that is something that the mind does. It fills in missing parts of a story because they can't remember it. So they fill it in, and they say things that don't make sense. And people say, why is he saying that? This doesn't make sense, and changes the story around. So the word confabulates, and anyone that has had someone in their family with dementia, and I don't, when I say dementia, I mean overall, whether it's Alzheimer's, whether it's after 85 years old or it's before 85, I'm talking about he shows all the telltale signs. He has problems with memory. He has problems with thinking. He has problems with the behavior. He's even having some of the physical problems. The trip. Some people. Then there's also visual spatial issues they have also. So why they keep saying the word age? Age has nothing to do with it. I have a very close relative that is 92, sharp as a tack. So this is not an issue of age. The reality of it is, if everybody doesn't believe it's dementia, why don't they just test him with mental status exam and do his MRI? We have enough things that are available today in 2023 that can be done for testing. And I promise you, he is getting every single medication and things to help him. Unfortunately, these medications, we don't have a cure right now for Alzheimer's, and I hope that it happens. The other thing I want to say is it's really so upsetting, as being someone that's had Alzheimer's dementia in the family, is that this family allows this man to not have the dignity to be
and you know what? I will say, Michelle, you are absolutely right on that. I'm gonna come back and talk about this a little bit after the break, Michelle. Thank you for calling Red Eye Radio, 866-90 Red Eye.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90 Red Eye.
Eight 866-90 Red Eye is the phone number. Dan Mandis in for Gary and Eric, one of the previous callers, said everybody's afraid to use the term dementia when it comes to Joe Biden. That's actually not true. Most people who look at what is going on with Joe Biden, not only are they not afraid to use the term dementia, they're using it because it clearly applies.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis. This is Red Eye Radio.
Appreciate you being here on Red Eye Radio. 866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. There is a lot going on. First of all, Congress is heading back into session this week. And, I do find it fun to sit around and just watch all of the hand-wringing regarding yet another government shutdown. And I decided many years ago that I was no longer going to play the game of covering the hand-wringing of, the possibility of a government shutdown, because it never happens. I mean, very rarely does it happen anyway. And typically if it does, it's not really all that big of a deal. But you see the hand-wringing and you see the media hyper-focusing on the possibility of a government shutdown when, in reality, everyone knows that it's either not going to happen or, if it does, it's not going to really be all that big of a deal. Now, what really is going on as, the Republicans and the Democrats head back to Washington, D.C., is what's going on with Joe and Hunter Biden as far as these investigations go. We all know the story here from the last couple of weeks. I mean, with Joe Biden and his use of aliases, these fake email addresses. And we've been talking, I know Gary and Eric obviously talking about them. I've been talking about them on my local show here in Nashville, Tennessee. I host a morning show on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. You can find out more information at 997WTN.com. I'm also on the socials at Dan Mandis Show. But why did Joe Biden have these 3 fake email addresses, including the names Robert Peters, Robin Ware, J.R.B. Ware? A couple of these were Gmail accounts as well. And so this is a conversation that is getting more and more interesting by the day. Because the more that we look into these 5,400 emails that were sent with these pseudonyms, the more people are asking questions like, for example, why is it the Biden administration is utilizing executive privilege when it comes to those who want to see what exactly is in those emails? Now, remember way back when there was the conversation regarding the emails and Burisma, and how you had Joe Biden and Hunter Biden allegedly, supposedly, possibly going back and forth on what Joe was going to say to the Ukrainian parliament regarding corruption within Ukraine. Because remember, it was that speech to Ukraine's parliament where he basically told Ukrainians' government that they needed to fire the guy that was investigating Burisma, which is the board that Hunter Biden was serving on. Everybody knows the story. Well, why was Joe allegedly going back and forth with Hunter and sending him drafts of this speech? I mean, I would tell you it's because they were talking about how Joe was going to pressure Ukrainian's government to fire the prosecutor looking into Burisma. It was during that trip, by the way, where Joe withheld that $1 billion until they fired that prosecutor. And so all of these stories are connected. And so while the media, very focused, of course, on all things Donald Trump, all things Fani Willis out there in Atlanta, Georgia, to me, the real story is what is going on with the current president, Joe Biden. And while the media may not be covering it by and large, they should be. They won't. And I believe that is why the media is losing all kinds of credibility. Matt Whitaker was on Fox News. If you don't remember who he is a former acting attorney general under former President Donald Trump. And he was on Fox News, one network that is covering it outside of talk radio, of course, and Newsmax. And he was on Fox News, and he was talking about how he suspects that some of these emails will be turned over, the ones that, the House Oversight Committee is looking for, and, Jim Jordan is looking for it over at Judicial as well. So there's a lot of these Republicans that are looking for these emails. And by the way, part of the news cycle this morning and this week will be Kevin McCarthy and this possibility of an impeachment inquiry. But one of the questions is, okay, so if it's up to the Biden administration, they're trying to hide some of these emails, but, some of these emails were actually Gmail addresses. And if that's the case, then the Republicans can go straight to the folks over there at Gmail and get these emails straight from them. Listen to, again, this is Matt Whitaker on Fox News.
Yeah, they're going to get some of this. I mean, right now they're being reviewed by President Biden's team, and they're going to redact things that they claim executive privilege on, or maybe even the two from. The interesting thing about these emails is two of them are Gmail accounts, which I think Congress could directly subpoena Google and get those emails. And it is concerning that the vice president's office was doing business on Gmail. That is usually a no-no for official business. You're supposed to use, the official email channels. But this case continues to develop. And I think ultimately, especially if it's an impeachment inquiry, there's going to be significant documents, including these emails, turned over.
Well, you know what? Again, it's a very big question. And a very big question indeed is, what was Joe Biden communicating with Hunter about, and what exactly is it that they are trying to hide? I mean, let's face it, Joe Biden has been caught in one lie after another after another. And so the more that the Biden administration, goes through all of this, you find out more and more about the lies of the Bidens. And so they talk about, and Matt Whitaker talking on Fox News again, about where Biden was using these fake email accounts and why it is that the president was using these fake email accounts to try and hide his communications that he was having with Hunter Biden.
Remember, there is a distinction between just truly personal business, which, again, you can conduct and nobody should be able to see that ultimately, and then official business. And my understanding of some of these documents, they were the vice president's office telling Hunter Biden about the president's schedule, potentially about Ukraine policy and things that would have been of interest to his business arrangements. And I think that's where the rubber meets the road and where the House Oversight Committee is really trying to dig in and get that information, because right now we've heard just little snippets of it, but ultimately, if that's the case, then this could be an explosion heard all over D.C. and beyond.
Yeah, this is really interesting. Jonathan Turley, who is one of my favorites, and he is from George Washington University, and he is a constitutional scholar, and I know that he's on Fox News all the time and some of the other outlets. And so this is great, because now apparently what's going on is that, one, Biden has actually now established a, quote, war room to deal with the possible impeachment. So that's number one. Number two, former President Obama is now being asked to bail out Joe Biden from yet another debacle of his own making, according to Jonathan Turley. Going back to his time in Obama's administration, various committees and private groups are seeking more than these 5,000 emails from Joe Biden, in which he did use the array of aliases during his time as vice president with Obama. Under the Presidential Records Act, Obama has 30 days to bar the release of the emails and to help shield his former vice president in a growing corruption scandal over the influence peddling operation run by Biden's son Hunter. Will former President Obama try to bar the release of these emails with these aliases to hide the corruption of his former vice president? And I'll go ahead and say that this would hide the corruption of the Obama administration. Because don't forget that when Biden is embarking in all of this influence peddling and the bribery schemes and so forth, he was obviously part of the Obama administration. So Obama, this is part of his administration. Everybody's focused on, Joe Biden, as they should, but this was part of Obama's administration. So Biden's corruption is also Obama's corruption. And did Obama know that all of this stuff was going on? I mean, inquiring minds want to know. This could cost him the election. This could ultimately lead to him being removed from the White House. Now, here's the deal. Kevin McCarthy is out there, and he is saying, because when I say it could remove him from the White House, what I'm saying is I don't believe, here's my official position on this, I don't believe that Joe Biden will be impeached. The reason why is because the ostrich-laden Democrats in the Senate, I don't care how strong the evidence is, the Democrats in the Senate will never vote guilty on impeachment. They will never vote to remove Joe Biden from the White House. Now, perhaps maybe in the House of Representatives, I just don't see that happening in the Senate. But I think the Republicans are smart to go down this road because they do need to let the American people know what Joe Biden and Barack Obama and the media and all of these Democrats were up to. I mean, it's not only the DOJ shielding Joe Biden and Hunter Biden with these investigations and doing whatever they can to stop these investigations, but the other part of this is the fact that all of this was going on during the Obama administration, and the media refused to cover it. This is such a web of deceit with Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, and the media and the DOJ goes on and on. It is a web of deceit, and the American people need to know this. I mean, remember, just go back to the very basics, that Joe Biden has said all along that he didn't know. He had no idea about his son's business dealings. Now, clearly we know that Joe Biden was lying. Here's more from Matt Whitaker.
Well, not only does it not look good, but there is circumstantial evidence. For example, Hunter Biden was texting with his sister saying, essentially, I have to give 50% of my income to Dad, to the vice president. And that is a meaningful piece of information and a piece of evidence in this overall scheme, it appears, where Hunter Biden is getting $1 million a year, the equivalent of it, from Burisma. He's getting several $1 million from the wife of the former mayor of Moscow. And then there's a dinner that followed that between Vice President Biden and this individual. And so there's a lot of smoke and there's a lot of things, a lot of circumstantial evidence. And, as a former prosecutor myself, I can tell you these are where you want to dig in. And ultimately, I'm not sure we'll ever have the smoking gun, the direct evidence where Joe Biden admits that this was the scheme. But to me, the points of the connections are being made right now as we speak.
Well, respectfully to Matt Whitaker, I don't know what else you need. I mean, people that listen to me in Nashville know I say this almost daily. Like, what more evidence do you need? I mean, you've got the money flowing through the shell accounts and into the pockets of Biden family members. You've got witnesses like Devin Archer and Tony Bobulinski. You've got the folks from Burisma that are out there saying that they gave Hunter and Joe Biden $10 million to get the government from Ukraine to stop that investigation. You've got the 1023, where you've got even supposedly there's tape recordings. Chuck Grassley talked about this way back when, and this made news last week. There's supposedly tape recordings out there that show that, and you listen to the tape recordings again, apparently that are so damning that it could actually lead to Joe Biden being removed from office this term. Greg Kelly from Newsmax was talking about that late last week. And so, while everybody is waiting for this smoking gun, well, it seems to me like there's a bunch of smoking guns. Joe Biden is never going to admit, and the Democrats will never admit that Joe Biden was up to no good, that Joe Biden is corrupt, that Joe Biden was influence peddling, that Joe and Hunter Biden were engaged in a bribery scheme. They will never admit it. So if that's what the Republicans are sitting around waiting for, they're going to be waiting a long time. Coming up next, what to expect in the upcoming, Congress is back in session now. What is Kevin McCarthy saying about an impeachment inquiry, and does he have the votes? Details straight ahead on Red Eye Radio. By the way, more of your calls coming up as well. 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. I want to say hello to, this is Greg calling from Atlantic City, New Jersey on Red Eye Radio. Hey, Greg, how are you?
Good morning. You're doing great.
Thank you.
How about you?
I'm doing great, man. Appreciate the call in. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Just a thought, and I digress from what we're talking about. But the only way anything is going to change with the direction of this country right now is for the Democratic rank and file to just tell the leadership, we're leaving. This is not the party that my parents believed in, nor my grandfather, nor my great-great-grandfather. What you people have created is unacceptable. And that's the only way it will ever change. Because right now, the leadership, and it's both sides of the dime, too, they act with reckless abandon. They don't give a damn anymore. They do whatever they want to do. And I can't see the rank and file Democrats believing in that at all.
You know what's interesting? Hey, Greg. Let me ask you this. You piqued my interest on something. So you said that, and by the way, I agree with you on both. Both parties have changed. The Democrats have certainly changed over the years. Good Lord. I look at the Democrats and I see them. You ever see the movie World War Z with Brad Pitt? I see the rank and file Democrats as like running around like the zombies, and they just, they don't see what's around them. They don't see the destruction of the Biden administration or the modern day Democrat Party. I think the Republican Party has also changed, but I think that the Republican Party, I think they have changed for the better. And and the reason why I say that, and this is, I think, a great debate, but I think the reason why the Republican Party has changed for the better is because they are reacting to what we've seen in politics over the past many years, where both sides, Republicans and Democrats, have not taken care of the southern border, have not had a balanced budget. They don't seem to care about balancing a budget. All they do is they spend. And so we see all of these problems that both sides have contributed to. And I think the Democrats have embraced these reckless policies. I think the Republican Party, the more conservative part of the Republican Party, they are actually trying to fix the problems that the Republican Party has contributed to over the past, many years. Very quickly, what say you?
Well, I agree with you, and the Republican side of the ledger has lost what their directive should be. Do not spend every dime that the Democrats want to spend.
And you are right, and I appreciate the call. Thank you very much, Greg. 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339.
Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios. Now, for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, here is Dan Mandis.
866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. So what is going to happen with the impeachment inquiry, which is what we are all expecting with Kevin McCarthy and the Republicans as they return, as Congress returns? And it does seem like as we find out more and more about what Joe and Hunter Biden were involved in, and I just, in the previous segment, we spoke a lot about, how there's just a lot of, as they say, circumstantial evidence. I don't believe that the evidence that is out there is circumstantial, because you're never going to get that smoking gun piece of evidence where, oh, look, the Russians or Burisma or whoever it might be put money directly into an account with Joe Biden's name on it, and then Joe Biden sent an email with his official vice president email address to the folks over there in Ukraine, telling them to stop the investigation into Burisma because they just gave us $10 million. If that's what you're waiting for, it's not going to happen. But with all of the evidence that is out there, anybody who is, a Republican or even a moderate or anybody just looking at this evidence and says that there is no evidence, they're either dumber than a stump or they're lying to you. So that's one of the big questions. Matt Whitaker, again, I was talking, playing some audio of him before the break. He is a former acting attorney general under the Trump administration. He was on Fox News, and he's breaking down some of this stuff. And so the big question is, will there be an impeachment inquiry? One of the big headlines out there today is that Congress is returning, and Kevin McCarthy is going to ultimately decide if he is going to call for an impeachment inquiry. He keeps saying that he is, going down that road, and he is strongly considering it. And so there's two big things that are going on right now. Number one is continuing the possibility of a short-term funding measure to keep the government offices fully functioning, which, it's interesting. This is from, where is this from? The Associated Press. A short-term funding measure to keep the government offices fully functioning will dominate the September agenda. I don't know if I would even ever say that our government these days is fully functioning. I mean, to me, it doesn't feel like it is, but whatever. But they're also talking about this impeachment inquiry, and they're talking about what will Kevin McCarthy do. Well, apparently the news is out now that he will go ahead and take a House vote on whether or not to go down this road of an impeachment inquiry. And so they were talking to, Fox News was interviewing Matt Whitaker, and this is part of what he had to say. Again, former acting attorney general for Donald Trump.
The last I heard from Speaker McCarthy is that he is going to take a vote on the impeachment inquiry and see if he can get the 218. And if you think about kind of that caucus and how, you have folks that are very much would vote right now to make that happen and others that are maybe a little more hesitant, that may be a good deliberate move. I'm not sure there are 218 members of the House that would vote for that. And if that's the case, then it's not going to proceed. But, Kevin McCarthy is a very careful tactician, and I think he'll, try to see where the mood of the caucus is. It's like herding cats at that level.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Every Republican that I've spoken to or interviewed there in the House of Representatives, they say that there is absolutely enough votes. The problem is McCarthy, from what I understand, he can only lose 4 Republicans, given the makeup of the House. And those Republicans, some of those Republicans are actually in districts where Joe Biden won. And so these are, by and large, very moderate or even blue districts that these House Republicans are in. And so the Republicans could run the risk. That's a big risk. The Republicans could run the risk of losing the House of Representatives if they go down this road of an impeachment inquiry and ultimately impeachment, because then the Democrats can campaign in those districts where the Republicans may have voted for this impeachment inquiry. And so part of what's going on is this debate there within the Republican Party as to whether or not this is the best way to go about finding out information about Joe Biden. Here's the thing, though, and everybody knows what happened with Merrick Garland. Merrick Garland assigned David Weiss as the special prosecutor in all things Hunter Biden. And so what that ultimately could do, and a lot of people are saying that this will really grind the Republicans and their investigation in House Oversight and House Judicial down into a grinding halt, because they don't have to then answer any questions because, well, there's an investigation underway. And so when it was announced that David Weiss was going to be the special prosecutor into Hunter Biden, this is the guy that has been protecting Hunter and Joe for, years now. And now he's the special prosecutor? Come on. Greg Jarrett was on Fox News as well. He is one of the legal analysts for Fox News, and he said, yeah, this whole thing seems like a ruse with the Democrats and the House side.
Well, it does change the process in a meaningful way. McCarthy, it seems, is going to be fair. There'll either be a House inquiry committee or a select committee. It'll have both sides on it. You'll recall in the first impeachment of Donald Trump,
right?
Secretive hearings in the basement of the House.
Yep.
Republicans were allowed to attend, but that's about it. They weren't given subpoena power. They couldn't call their own witnesses. Right. They were limited and restricted in cross-examination, so it was essentially a sham. And then they didn't vote out of the committee, but it simply went to the floor where Democrats had the vote. The second impeachment was even worse. They didn't even bother to hold any hearings. It was a snap impeachment. Here, I think McCarthy is determined to be fair.
Yeah, and as far as the Republicans go, and as far as Kevin McCarthy goes, you look at what Nancy Pelosi did, specifically in that second impeachment attempt, where they didn't really have anybody on Donald Trump's side. Yes, you had Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney, right, two Republicans. But when it came to the issue of Donald Trump in January 6th, there was no one to defend Donald Trump. There was no one that was allowed to give Donald Trump's side of the story. And if you paid attention to those hearings, you know that they took Donald Trump's speech way out of context. They edited out the part of the speech where he said march peacefully and patriotically down to the Capitol. The other part of that, of course, as you all know, because you listen to Gary and Eric and Red Eye Radio and you listen to talk radio, you also know that the Democrats used the same exact words as Donald Trump years prior. Yet for Donald Trump, they tried to impeach him. 866-90 Red Eye, 866-907-3339. So on the one hand, you can maybe say, well, at least Kevin McCarthy is trying to be fair. He's trying to really be strategic about whether or not he wants to bring this impeachment inquiry, and he's going to bring it to an entire floor vote. Now, the problem is, if he does that, then he could, as I mentioned before, he could put some Republicans at peril, because then if they serve in Biden districts, in districts that Joe Biden won, then you've got the Democrats who can then campaign against those Republicans based on that vote. To the phones we go, 866-90 Red Eye, and let's say hello to Larry calling from Buena Park on Red Eye Radio. And Larry, thanks for calling in. Go ahead. Buena Park, California.
No problem. Hey, Dan, thanks. This is kind of a backtrack, but earlier you're talking about how the parties have changed and what's going on. I think in some ways the guys that are already elected, they're not going to change, but the grassroots Democrats, I can't decide if they're either suffering from a Stockholm syndrome type thing or a version of the battered wife syndrome, because even they got to realize that their leaders have been lying to them with a nod and a wink, and when they get caught, it's like we'll just do better next time, and then they do the exact same thing, and then they forgive them all over again and keep voting for them.
I think part of what it is, Larry, you talk about Stockholm syndrome. I think what's going on is, these folks, whether it is Republicans or Democrats, and thank you for the call, Larry, Republicans or Democrats, they are addicted to their power. And so they want to stay in as long as possible, and they enjoy the swamp. They enjoy life in Washington, D.C., and any way that they can retain their power, they do. Meantime, you've got Mitch McConnell, who, he keeps freezing. That was a big story last week that Eric and Gary and everyone covered, where McConnell has now been cleared to come back to the office, and the doctors are saying that he's fine. Well, he's not fine. He's, I think, what is he, late 70s, early 80s now, Mitch McConnell? He's really old. And I do understand that he is a Republican, but here's the thing. You can't sit here and criticize Joe Biden and talk about Dianne Feinstein and not also mention that Mitch McConnell is starting to have episodes. And so now I think we need to question whether or not Mitch McConnell should, at the very least, be taken off of his leadership role in the Senate. So it is about power, and it is about retaining that power. So if you're a moderate Democrat, well, look what's going on with Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin is going to be primaried, and now he's thinking about running as a third-party candidate for president, I guess. And so, if you don't go with the flow of the radicals on the left, then they're going to primary you out. That's part of the dynamic, and I appreciate the call. Kathy is in Scranton, PA. Kathy, thanks for calling.
Hi,
And
how you doing?
I bet you get tired of Joe Biden showing up every once in a while and then claiming that he's, Scranton Joe.
I do. And the thing of it is, they write all these horrendous stories about how wonderful he is.
Yeah.
They name streets and expressways after him.
Didn't he move from Scranton like when he was 2 or 3?
Yeah, he was 10. And he
was
went
10.
to Delaware and ain't looked back. He only comes for votes. And
Well,
the
that's
thing of
exactly
it is,
right.
A lot of this facade that he puts on, we all know it's not real. And when they hired him to be our president, he was in the basement, and they knew that he was sick, and they knew it, and they were playing checkers. This is Obama. I'm telling you, they're protecting Obama because Obama knew about all this because he signed off on it. When he said about firing the prosecutor, remember that?
Yep.
The guy said about, you're not the president. And then what did Joe say? Biden says, call him. Because you know what I'm saying? It's
Kathy, yep. Not only do I know what you're saying, Kathy, and I appreciate the call. You touched on something really important, and that was Obama. Let's remember, and maybe we'll talk about this in the next hour, but by and large, the Biden administration is simply an extension of the old Obama administration because Biden's administration has really clearly, obviously been infiltrated by a whole bunch of former Obama people. And so part of the dynamic here is that, yes, the Democrats are, Kathy, to your point, they're trying to do whatever they can do to protect Barack Obama because in reality, it sure does seem like he is the one calling the shots and not Joe Biden. 866-90 Red Eye, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here. This is Red Eye Radio.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90 Red Eye.
It's Red Eye Radio, 866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here in for Gary and Eric. And you know what? Coming up, going to talk a little bit about what is going on within the Biden administration and who is actually running the Biden administration. Because a lot of people have been asking, including yours truly, by the way. It is clear that Joe Biden is riddled with dementia. So who's running the show? I've got details on that straight ahead. This is Red Eye Radio. Again, 866-90 Red Eye, 866-907-3339.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. How are you? Gary and Eric, they return a week from yesterday. Sunday night, Monday morning is when they will return. I got to tell you, a lot of people are laughing at Joe Biden. Now, I realize that every single day people are laughing at Joe Biden for one reason or another. But, there's this ongoing, you remember way back when the train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. And it's been this waiting for Joe Biden to finally go to, East Palestine, Ohio, which, by the way, as you folks probably know, is Donald Trump country. And so they had this train derailment there, and everybody's wondering, okay, so why won't Biden just go to East Palestine? And it's become this thing now where it's like Biden has been saying for a long time, yeah, in the near future, we're going to go. You had this big train disaster, but he won't go. And so I'm pretty certain now the people of East Palestine could give two rips as to whether or not Biden actually shows up. But he was asked the question because he's in Florida because of the hurricane there. And by the way, maybe we'll get into this, but I loved how Governor Ron DeSantis, of course, you all know he's running for president in the primary. And so Biden was going to Florida, and apparently DeSantis and his team and Biden's team said, we're going to meet at this certain place, and we're going to have the photo op, and we're going to speak to the reporters. DeSantis didn't show up. And so now people are kind of like saying that basically DeSantis pulled the fast one on Joe Biden. DeSantis basically saying, you know what, Biden's coming here for a photo op, and I'm busy helping the people of Florida. So Biden shows up, and there's no Ron DeSantis. So then Senator Rick Scott does show up. And if I were Rick Scott out there in Florida, I would tell Biden to go pound sand, because Biden has been lying about Rick Scott for, better part of a year. Because remember way back when Rick Scott was saying that, he had this plan to balance the budget, and he had all kinds of, different ways that he wanted to do that. And so Biden and the Democrats, they hijacked Rick Scott's plan, and basically they used it against him and took his plan completely out of context, and saying that he wanted to raise taxes on each and every American, which is not exactly true. But anyway, Rick Scott kind of bailed out Biden, and he chose to show up so that the president could say that they had a little bipartisan kumbaya in Florida. Whatever. Then the president was asked about going to East Palestine because he finally went to Hawaii. He finally went to Maui. He went to Florida, but he still hasn't gone to East Palestine. I wonder why that is.
I said in March that you would go to East Palestine, Ohio. You came here. How come you haven't gone to East Palestine yet?
Well, I haven't had the occasion to go to East Palestine. There's a lot going on.
I would ask President Biden, what is going on? What exactly is going on? Because you have been on vacation. You were on vacation in Delaware for, I think it was at least a week, right? And then you went to Lake Tahoe. And so my question to Biden would be, okay, so why can't you go to East Palestine, Ohio? What exactly is the problem? Because you've been asked to go for, it's been like 6 months.
Here, and I just haven't been able to break. I was thinking whether I'd go to East Palestine this week, but I then was reminded I've got to go literally around the world.
Uh-huh.
I'm going from Washington to India to Vietnam and so it's going to be a while. But we're making sure that East Palestine has what they need materially in order to deal with their problems.
And again, to me, I feel like this whole thing about him going to East Palestine, it's a game at this point. I think it's just a big game of I gotcha from the media. Because they keep asking Biden, when you going, when you going, when you going? And he's just refusing to go. But here's the deal. People in Florida and people in Hawaii, they're not exactly thrilled to see the president. I mean, let's be honest. Biden is an empty vessel. There's really nothing going on upstairs. We have covered that in depth here tonight. And so for the president, to me, my message would be don't go to East Palestine, Ohio. You know why? Because the people of East Palestine, Ohio, they don't need to see you. I mean, when you went, I would say to Joe Biden that the people in Hawaii were not exactly thrilled to see you. I don't know about the people in Florida, but certainly the people in Hawaii were not happy to see you at all. And the reason why is because, first, you said that you had no comment on what happened in Hawaii. And then when you arrived in Hawaii, you fell asleep. You fell asleep as people were talking about how much they lost and how their loved ones had perished in the fire. You literally fell asleep. And so the people there in Hawaii, I think they speak for all of us when they say,
wow, yeah, awesome. Yeah, thanks for nothing. You.
Yeah, that's what happened in Hawaii when Biden finally shows up, is they're waiting for his motorcade, and you've got middle fingers flying. You've got dozens and dozens of people yelling, F you, F you, F you. And they were not impressed with the president, nor were they impressed with the $700 that they got initially for their troubles. And so people were really angry when the president shows up in Hawaii. And the problem that Biden has is that wherever he goes and whenever he goes someplace, he always says that, he starts regaling people with his stories of, how he tries to relate to whatever issue or group that he is addressing. And he always says,
and they ran into flames.
He starts talking about, again, the fire in his Delaware kitchen.
And they ran into flames to save my wife and save my family. Not a joke.
No, it's not a joke. It's actually a lie, because the Washington Post and many other outlets have talked about how Joe did not lose a lot during that fire. It was an insignificant fire, but he has again talked about how the firefighters, we almost lost a couple of firefighters that day. They rescued his wife, Jill. His wife, Jill, was the one that called the firefighters. And so this fire that he had years ago, he keeps saying the same story over and over again, telling the same story over and over again. And the reality is that it was an insignificant fire, but he keeps trying to make this fire bigger in the minds of the American people. Why does he keep doing that? He did it in Hawaii, and people were screaming that he told that story that has been debunked so many times. And he told it again in Hawaii, trying to relate to the people there that had lost everything. And he joked about how he almost lost his Corvette. And, of course, the instant joke is, okay, well, then did you almost lose all those classified documents that you had in your garage too, Joe? And then he goes to Florida, and he did the same exact thing. When he comes out to Florida, and he told that same story yet again about the Delaware fire. And that's one of many stories that Joe continues to tell that has been debunked over and over again. Let's say hello to Bryce in, is that Michigan on Red Eye Radio? Bryce, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Yes, I'm in Southgate, Michigan. You just hit on a really great point. He tells these stories over and over again. And I think that Kevin McCarthy could actually build his impeachment inquiry around the story that he kept telling about when he actually was in Ukraine with his son. He took his son with him, and they wanted to prosecute his son. And Joe said to the person, well, he says, you can't do that. He says he was holding $1 billion in federal aid that he and Barack Obama decided that they were going to bestow on Ukraine. And they said that they were going to prosecute his son for corruption. And he says, look, I'm leaving here. And he said, I looked at my watch, and he says, I'm leaving here in about an hour. And if that prosecutor is not fired, you don't get the $1 billion. And the Ukrainian official said, you can't do that. You're not the president. And Joe says, call him. So he says, half an hour later, he says, well, and then expletive deleted, the guy got fired. So he actually leveraged $1 billion of taxpayer money to get the prosecutor fired that was going to arrest his corrupt son.
Well, Bryce, I appreciate the call. There's a couple of things there. Number one, they were looking into Burisma, where his son was serving on the board. They were investigating Burisma. I don't think they were specifically investigating Hunter, although certainly he could have been part of that mix because, let's face it, Burisma was bribing Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, the $10 million, to get Joe to get the Ukrainians to halt that investigation. So there is a lot there. And let's face it, Joe has told lie after lie after lie. So to me, your bigger point, I think your name was, I forget what Bryce. Your bigger point, Bryce, is that Biden has told a lot of lies, and I think the American people have heard the same lies over and over again. Let's see here. Let's say hello to, this is Devin calling from Nashville on Red Eye Radio. Devin, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for calling in. Go ahead.
All right. So my concern is, like, I've been a Trump supporter my whole life. Like, he's awesome. He's great. But I've been seeing a trend lately. Like, he's been losing lately. And he's in a lot of trouble. And, like, I support the Republican Party.
Right.
And I just don't see a way out of it.
So, Devin, when you see that his support, especially in the, I don't know how long you've been listening, but there's a new poll out there that shows this from the Wall Street Journal. I talked about it earlier, where in national polling, you've got Biden and Trump, where they are literally neck and neck. That's number one. And number two, you have a lot of support for Donald Trump, not only within hardcore Trump supporters like yourself, Devin, but also moderates as well. Black folks and Hispanic folks have also not gone back to Joe Biden. And so I know what you're saying. And also, let's be honest, and let me finish, Devin, then I'll let you talk. But we have to acknowledge that, yes, you've got the national polling, which is all fine, well, and good. But, you know, a presidential election is won in individual states in totality. So, but there is also evidence that shows that, you know, some of the polling shows that Donald Trump would do well in some of those battleground states as well. So as improbable as it sounds, yeah, there is a possibility that Donald Trump could win. Although I do understand, Devin, your pessimism. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's the thing, though. So, like, in 2016, he didn't win the popular vote. In 2020, he didn't run the popular vote. In the midterms, he lost the popular vote. And right now, he's just like, he's in a lot of trouble. So, like, what I'm trying to say is, like, I don't think we should focus on him being the primary candidate. I know it sucks. I know it's terrible. I know you don't want to hear it. But I feel like we should probably, like, maybe get somebody else in there that might get the job done.
All right, so Devin, real quick, because I'm running out of time. So let's say it's not Trump. Well, then who do you like? Do you like Vivek Ramaswamy? Do you like Ron DeSantis? Do you like Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, Asa Hutchinson, Chris Christie? Who do you like if not Trump?
as weird as it sounds, like I'm probably going for what's his name from New York, the big guy,
Chris Christie. He's from New Jersey.
Chris Christie. Yeah. Like it seems like he's spitting like the most like real stuff that needs to be talked about.
All right. Thank you very much, Devin. I appreciate it. 866-90-RED-EYE. Got to run. 866-907-3339.
Hi, I'm Jen Loomis, a transport safety expert at JJ Keller, and I'm here to share a tip on roadside inspections. Roadside inspections all begin with the driver interview, during which the officer will gather basic information from the driver and prepare the driver for the inspection. The officer will also be evaluating the driver, determining if the driver can speak English, is under the influence of anything, has an illness, or is fatigued. The officer will ask the driver for required documents, including vehicle and driver credentials, the driver's log, and shipment paperwork. The officer may also conduct a vehicle inspection. Before beginning the inspection, the officer will take steps to make sure the inspection can be done safely. These include chalking the wheels, wearing personal protective equipment, and explaining what will be required of the driver. The driver needs to pay close attention to these instructions so that the vehicle inspection can be conducted in a manner that is safe for the inspection official. This tip was brought to you by JJ Keller & Associates. Visit us at jjkeller.com.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
Eight 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Want to say hello to, this is going to be Rick, has been waiting for a minute. Rick, thanks for calling Red Eye Radio. Go ahead.
Hey, Dan. First of all, I'd like to nominate a name for the so-called mainstream media. I like to call it the seedier media for obvious reasons.
Very good.
That being said, you're going to have to put me in the pessimism category. Your optimism for this election is not contagious. First of all, if Joe Biden is the Democratic nominee, he is not going to be held accountable by the media. He's not going to debate the Republican nominee. And the media, once again, like in a bad sequel, is going to not cover him, but cover up his flaws and his corruption and his lies. I don't have a lot of faith in the intelligence of the independent voters. If they were that stupid last time, they'll be that stupid again. So I'm having a hard time understanding your optimism.
So what I would say, and I appreciate the call, Rick, in Washington State, what I would say is that we know a lot more now than we did during, obviously, 2020, including the fact that the laptop from hell was actually legit. So, yeah, I believe that Donald Trump, he can and will go on an I Told You So tour. And by the way, so should all the other Republicans, just to be clear.
Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios. Now, for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, here is Dan Mandis.
866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. I've been watching this whole thing with Burning Man out there in the middle of the Nevada desert. Did you hear what happened, Burning Man? I have a personal request. If you are one of the tens of thousands of people that are trying to leave the Nevada desert and Burning Man, call right now and call us at 866-90-RED-EYE. I want to know what you experienced. So, you can file this under what could go wrong. You've got 73, 74, 75,000 people in the middle of the Nevada desert. And they're all there to do all of this hedonistic stuff with Burning Man, right? So basically it's a multi-day festival. They've got music. They've got campers. It almost feels like a wannabe Woodstock kind of a thing. But the whole thing is in a circle around this massive, like, fire. And that's where the whole Burning Man thing comes in. And they've been doing it for the last several years. And they had a big issue this time because they had this massive rainstorm. I want you to imagine this. You've got like 73, 74, 75,000 people that are all at this massive outdoor festival. And then 9 to 10 inches of unexpected rain suddenly fall in the middle of the desert, making the entire thing nothing but a muddy mess. So muddy, as a matter of fact, and so deep was the mud that they actually closed the entrances and the exits. They did not want people to leave because their cars would get stuck in the mud. That's how bad it was. They started telling people, we don't know how long we're going to be stuck in here with all of this rain and all of this mud that our vehicles cannot drive through. 73,000 people basically held hostage inside of this area. And people are trying to walk out. People are trying to walk out, and they have to walk for miles and miles and miles and miles to get out because they can't use their cars. And because they can't use their cars, they've got to, walk, again, the 5 or so miles out of there. And it's crazy. One of those that had to walk, Chris Rock, the actor. And so it's a great photo because he and some other people, they're walking the 5 miles, and then they were picked up by some dude in a pickup truck. And who's in the back of this pickup truck but none other than Chris Rock? And there's a whole bunch of other celebrities, I guess, that were there, most of which I've never heard of. But it was just, it was a nightmare. One 32-year-old man died. They don't know exactly how he died. But you know what? You had 73,000 people that were basically held hostage in all of this mud and muck. Now, apparently, finally, after the rain subsided and things, become less muddy, now you had, apparently last night, maybe people are still trying to get out, you had like 65,000 people. Once they finally, lit the whole Burning Man thing on fire and everybody decided to leave, you had, the pictures, the drone footage is incredible. I want you to think about the worst concert you've ever tried to leave, the biggest ball game you've ever tried to leave. Multiply that by 1,000. And that's what happened out there in the middle of the Nevada desert. And to be honest with you, I don't know why people go to Burning Man. I'm way out of the demo on that one. But Chris is in Dayton, Ohio. And Chris, you've got some friends who are at Burning Man?
Yeah.
And how did they like it?
There's two ways you can look at it, right? Like, it's Mother Nature. Things are going to happen. So you're either going to have the mud and the muck, or you're going to have hella sandstorms, and you're going to have sand in your face the entire time. The benefit of the rain is it cooled it down a lot. It was 20 degrees cooler than what was expected, right? They all went there expecting to stay the entirety of the week. The rain kind of caused a lot of them to just want to go home and not deal with the wetness and all of that. But as far as being stranded, they weren't being stranded. They weren't being told you have to stay. They're being told, like, you guys can go ahead and try, but, there's 300, 400 cars already buried to the axles out there. So you can go out away from the community, which is what that's called, Burning Man. It's a community. Everybody's out there helping each other, Right. They don't charge for food. They don't charge for water. They don't charge for nothing. Everything is free out there. If you need water, they give you water. If you need food, they give you food. It's a community. So what they're saying is, if you get in your cars and you go and you get stranded, you are away from the community. You're out in the middle of the desert by yourself. And there's no telling how long it's going to take for us to get wreckers out here to get you out. So it's better to stay in the community, in the circles. And people risk it. They went out, they were getting stranded. They were You know how people are once traffic starts and it starts hitting the news and Twitter and all things like that. It just went out of control. But the majority of the people were still having fun. They were still hanging out, listening to music, and doing what they went there to do.
So it wasn't nearly as bad as the media is portraying it to be, as, a sort of chaos as people are trying to leave and they're being forced to stay inside the community, as you say?
No, it's not as bad as the media is trying to let it to be. I mean, it's like everything else the media says, it's, amplified by tenfold. But in reality, there are a few people that are, like you said, you're talking about these celebrities that nobody knows, right? They went out there for what they thought was like the new Coachella. And, if you look back at Woodstock, right, it was rained out too. Like there was massive rain and mud there. But
actually, you're right. I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, I'm big on the festival scene. I go last year. Me and my wife we went to 33 different shows last year. We're taking a break this year, obviously because of money and funds. But it's a life that we live. I promote shows. I got lots of friends and fans who travel around the country. But it's something that we deal with. I've been to some shows where summer camp 2 years ago, it was a foot of water underneath of us in Chicago or in Illinois. So, I mean, it's just what happens. When you go out in the middle of the fields, you go out in the middle of the desert, and we're dealing with Mother Nature, it's things that we deal with. And one of the best times I've ever had at a show was in Virginia where it rained the entire weekend, but we made it work, and it's one of the best memories I'll ever have in my life with me and my friends.
Well, Chris, it's sort of like I always say, people who know me personally know that I say this all the time. It's like steering into the train wreck, right? So it's part of the adventure, I would say.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, that's what we live for. We live to be one with nature, to be closer to nature. I mean, that's why they're out there doing it, to not have the hustle and the bustle of everyday life, to go out there, not have the pollution of light and sound and all that. It's just, it really connects you with the ground, with earth. And, I don't want to sound like a dirty hippie or anything, but that's really what it is. It's like even, if you're a Republican, just think about sitting on a boat. You don't need to have your fishing pole in the water. You just need the sound of that water and the wind and the nature. And that's truly what it is. And if you cannot appreciate that, you can't appreciate something that they're going through right now.
So not a lot of folks out there talking about politics, I assume?
No. I'm in the festival scene. A lot of the hippies, like, it's not. And that's one of the big things I have about this world is politics. It's big in what we deal with our everyday life, right? Mm-hmm. But in reality, there's Trump supporters within the hippie communities. There's people. The thing is we just want a better life for everybody, right? We understand that nothing in this world comes for free. Everything's going to cost somebody something, right?
Right.
But if we can make it work as a family, right, just your family, somebody in your family needs something, somebody dies, everybody gets together. They're there for moral support. They're there to bring dinners, everybody gathers, whatever. That's what.
That. You dropped the S-bomb. Got it? Oh, good. Thank you, Chris. Chris giving us a bit of a play-by-play on the whole festival culture. I've been to some of those festivals before, and I actually understand what Chris is saying. I'm a rock and roller from way back, and I used to love those festivals. I did. You get to a point when you get older, I think, though, where you want your coffee pot, you want your bathroom, and you want your cable TV. But I totally understand where Chris is coming from, and I do appreciate sort of this we're all united when we're out at Burning Man, and I totally get that. I do. For me, I think that part of what's going on in America today, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, is you do have a lot of people that are, dreading. This is where we started out the program this morning. People are dreading 2024 and the presidential election there. And I think Chris And the folks out there at that Burning Man, they're tapping into that, oh, gosh, we're dreading this, and so we're just going to, party, which is all fine and well and good. However, when reality hits and when you come back to reality, the problems of the world and the problems of America, they're still there. And that's why these conversations are so important. The phone number, 866-90-RED-I, 866-907-3339. Let's see here. Mark is out there in Long Island. He says that presidents should not go to disaster areas. Mark, go ahead. You're on Red Eye Radio.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, granted, Biden, empathy is not his thing. But I don't care if it's Trump, Biden, George Washington. What it is involved for the president to go anywhere.
Right.
I work at JFK. We're doing construction. Biden came in for a few hours to Manhattan. The C-17s come in. They carry his motorcade. His helicopters come in on airplanes.
Yep.
I mean, I would rather see a president get in front of the podium in a disaster time of disaster and say, look, I want to be there, but they're not going to let me pick up a shovel or a fire hose. The multiple millions of dollars that it would take to get me there to shake a hand, let's give to you people directly.
Well, and
why waste the money for me to be there just so you can see me, trying to act like I care?
And Mark, you're right. And I think when we were talking about Biden refusing to go to East Palestine, or the fact that he was booed in Hawaii when he finally shows up, I think the booing wasn't because he was there and taking up resources. He was booed because he said no comment twice when he was asked about what was going on in Hawaii. He didn't even have any kind of a comment prepared that would show that he is at the very least the consoler in chief, which is part of what you're supposed to do as a president. But Mark, you'll be surprised to hear I agree with you, actually, in the sense that
They would complain. They would complain, and the $750. If he did his empathy thing from a podium in a hallway in the White House, and they added to that $750 for everyone a piece of what it would cost to get him there,
yep,
I think they'd have appreciated that a whole lot more.
And I appreciate the call very much. 866-90-RED-I, 866-907-3339. We'll return next.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-I.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-I is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Mark in Santa Cruz, California is on Red Eye Radio. Mark, thanks for holding on. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Dan. Nice to be able to call the show for a change and get on. I have a solution for Trump to get out of this mess. I want to say this for the end of my call, but in the meantime, most Americans believe that the election was rigged, or Trump would not be doing so well in the polls. And if you look at it, the FBI used to be run by a guy named J. Edgar Hoover, who was an apologist for the mafia, pretending they didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And his name is still in all their buildings, which leads me to think that the mafia still runs the FBI, which would explain why the election got rigged and no one found the evidence. But Trump could get out of this mess. He's one of the world's biggest celebrities. He's on television. He's photographed. He's talked about. But he's wearing the wrong message. He needs to broadcast a message on his hat.
And on that note, we'll cover that. We'll expand upon that coming up next here on Red Eye Radio.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.